Welcome to the Allison Knows podcast.
Oh.
We are diving into something today that seems like it's everywhere these days.
Yeah.
All this talk about DEI backlash.
It's a hot topic.
It is a hot topic.
Yeah.
And, 2024 is coming up. So we're going to look at this, especially in the face of the upcoming election.
Absolutely.
You guys sent us a ton of stuff.
So much stuff.
Yeah, articles, studies even.
Like social media threads. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, some of those were pretty heated.
Definitely.
But you want to know, what are the real arguments here?
Right.
Like, what is at the heart of all of this, and what could happen?
What are the consequences?
Yeah, what are the consequences of this whole thing?
Yeah, because we're talking about real stuff here.
Right.
Like people's jobs,
Yeah.
the future of our country,
Yeah.
what happens with companies.
Exactly. And we are going to dig into all of this
That's why we're here.
so that you can understand all of this stuff.
Absolutely.
So much of this is framed as like two sides battling it out.
Right versus left.
But is it really that simple?
Not really, no. It's much more complex than that.
Okay, so let's back up for a sec.
Okay.
What are we even talking about when we say DEI?
Right.
What does that even mean?
So DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
We hear these words everywhere.
Yeah, it's like a buzzword.
It is.
But what do they actually mean?
Right. So one of the sources you sent had a really good example of what it looks like when DEI is missing.
Okay.
Remember the Golden Globes in 2023?
Oh, yeah, with Jared Carmichael.
Yes. He called out the Hollywood Foreign Press Association.
The HFPA?
Yeah. The group that actually votes on the awards for
Okay.
not having a single black journalist.
What?
Yeah.
Until after George Floyd was murdered.
Yeah. It was a big deal.
It was a big moment for sure.
It showed how not having diverse voices, literally impacts what we see.
And who gets awarded?
Exactly.
Yeah.
For years, there were no black journalists helping to decide anything at the Golden Globes.
It's crazy to think about that.
It is. Think about how that might have changed things.
Who got nominated?
Totally. What movies and shows were even considered?
Which actors got awards?
And ultimately, what stories were told?
That's huge.
Yeah.
It's not just about the numbers.
Right.
It's about who gets to be a part of the decision-making.
Who has a seat at the table?
Exactly. And how that shapes the stories we tell as a culture.
That's the point.
And speaking of big cultural shifts, 2020 seems to have been a turning point for DEI.
You're right. The murder of George Floyd was huge for racial justice in America.
Yeah.
And after that, tons of companies started making commitments to DEI.
Like big companies.
Yeah, even huge ones like Google and Target.
Right.
They made these big public statements about addressing racism.
And increasing diversity.
Exactly.
But it feels like at the same time we saw this rise of the whole woke thing.
The woke versus anti-woke thing.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like DEI got caught in the middle of it.
Definitely.
Like the word woke became a weapon.
to attack anything progressive.
Exactly.
It's interesting how DEI became a symbol for some people. Okay.
It represented everything they thought was wrong with society.
Like what?
Like political correctness being too sensitive, cancel culture.
All of that.
Yeah.
And it's not just happening in our culture.
Right.
It's become political, too.
Absolutely.
We saw in the sources that the Trump administration is actually trying to dismantle DEI.
In the government.
Yeah.
And by putting pressure on businesses that work with the government.
The federal contractors.
Exactly.
We saw so many examples of orders and policies aimed at cutting DEI programs.
Like what kind of examples?
Well, things like some federal agencies weren't allowed to even celebrate Black History Month.
Wow.
I know, right?
Crazy.
And DEI staff being put on leave.
Seriously.
Yeah. And they're even taking DEI language out of anything funded by the government.
That's wild.
It feels like they're trying to undo all the progress that's been made.
It does feel that way.
And then there's Carla Gilbride.
Oh, yeah, the lawyer.
Yeah, the top lawyer at the EEOC.
She got fired by the Trump administration, and she was worried that they were overstepping their power
And she talked about Elon Musk's influence, too.
on the government.
Yeah.
It's scary to think about.
It is. It makes you wonder about due process and what role private companies should have.
In making public policy.
Exactly. And it's not just about her losing her job.
Right.
It's about what this does to other people who support DEI.
Like it makes them afraid to speak up.
Yeah. Who wants to risk their job?
It's like they're trying to shut down the whole conversation about DEI.
It's silencing people, for sure.
And it's not just the government doing this.
Yeah, right.
One of the sources compared how people talk about DEI to tactics used in fascism.
Fascism, that's a strong word.
I know, right? But they actually referenced Jason Stanley's work.
Oh, the philosopher.
Yeah.
He wrote about how fascist leaders gain power.
Yeah, and he listed 10 specific tactics they use.
Like what kind of tactics?
Well, he talks about creating an us versus them mentality
Right.
and using minority groups as scapegoats.
Blaming them for problems?
Exactly, and attacking truth and expertise.
It's like saying experts can't be trusted.
Yeah, and promoting this idea of a perfect past.
Like things were so much better back then.
Right, and you can see those tactics used against DEI.
How so?
Well, like saying that DEI is a threat to real Americans.
Oh, yeah.
Or that it's brainwashing people with some radical agenda.
It's all about fear and division.
Exactly, and that's what's so dangerous about it.
When you start demonizing entire groups of people,
And saying you can't trust institutions.
you create the perfect conditions for extremism.
And authoritarianism.
And it's not just theoretical.
Like, this has actually happened.
We're seeing it with white supremacist groups becoming more prominent.
And attacks on voting rights.
And then trying to ban books.
And limiting access to education.
That's a scary pattern.
It is. And it's important to see how all these things are connected.
Absolutely.
And this backlash against DEI isn't limited to the government.
Right.
We see it in companies, too.
Big time.
Google, Target, Meta.
They're all scaling back or getting rid of their DEI programs.
Well, why are they doing this?
Well, there's a few reasons.
Okay.
Some companies are getting pressure from conservative customers.
Wait, they don't want to shop there anymore.
Yeah, and social media campaigns, too.
Calling for boycotts.
Exactly. Boycotts of companies that seem too woke.
Interesting how consumers have so much power now.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Companies care about their image.
Especially with social media.
Everything is public now.
Right. And some companies are also worried about getting sued.
Especially after the Supreme Court decided against affirmative action.
Right. So the laws are changing.
Yeah, and companies are trying to figure out how to deal with that.
It's confusing for them.
It is.
And then there's the whole money factor.
Right.
Some companies maybe jumped on the DEI bandwagon.
Without really meaning it.
Exactly.
Like it was just for show.
And now that it's getting complicated,
And the economy is shaky.
they're backing out.
To please investors and avoid controversy.
So it's like this mix of pressure. And it's tough for companies that really do care about DEI.
Trying to balance all of those things. It raises questions about the role of companies.
Right? Are they just about making money?
Or do they have a responsibility to society?
That's a good question.
And if they do have a responsibility,
How do they do that and still make money?
and keep their customers happy?
Right.
Those are things we're going to talk about more.
If you're enjoying all of this, be sure to like, subscribe, and share.
Yes. Let us know what you think.
You can find Allison Knows on Spotify and YouTube.
Absolutely.
Now let's get into one of the most controversial parts of this.
Okay.
The whole meritocracy debate.
This is where things get really interesting.
It is.
This whole meritocracy debate is kind of like this fight between wanting more diversity,
Right.
but also wanting the best people in the right jobs.
Yeah, like, are those two things even compatible?
Right. That's what people are arguing about.
So people against DEI say it's not fair.
Exactly. They say it's not about qualifications anymore.
So it's about your identity.
Right. They think people are getting jobs just because of their race or gender.
And not because they're actually the best person for the job.
Exactly.
But isn't that a little too simple?
Yeah, I mean, people who support DEI say that's not what it's about at all.
Okay, so what do they say?
They say it's about making things more fair.
More fair.
How? By making sure everyone has the same chances.
But don't we already have that?
That's what a lot of people think.
Right.
People who support DEI say no. They say the system is rigged.
Rigged against who?
Against people from groups who have been discriminated against.
Like people of color, women.
Yeah, all kinds of groups.
So they're saying those people don't have the same opportunities.
Exactly. Even if they're just as qualified.
So DEI is about fixing that.
Exactly. It's about removing those obstacles.
And making sure everyone has a fair shot.
Yes. A fair chance to get the job based on their skills and hard work.
Not on who they know or what they look like.
Exactly. One of the sources made a really good analogy. They said it's like a race where some runners have to start way behind.
Oh, wow.
Or they have to carry heavy weights.
And the other runners don't.
Nope.
So it's not a fair race at all.
Right. And then if you only look at who crosses the finish line first.
It looks like they won fair and square.
But they didn't.
Because the race was rigged from the start.
Exactly. And that's what DEI is trying to fix.
By making sure everyone starts the same place.
And has the same opportunity.
Okay, that makes sense. But is it actually working?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, like, are things really changing?
Well, some data shows that white men are still in most of the leadership roles.
Really?
Yeah. So clearly there's still a long way to go.
So DEI isn't a magic solution.
No, It's not going to fix everything overnight.
It takes time to dismantle all these systems of power.
And privilege.
Right. And it's not just about the numbers.
Yeah.
It's about how these changes are actually happening.
Like, are companies just doing the bare minimum?
Just to check a box.
Exactly. Or are they really changing their culture?
To be more inclusive.
That's the key.
One of the sources said that DEI has to be part of the company's DNA.
What does that even mean?
Like, it can't just be this separate program.
Right. It has to be part of everything they do.
From hiring to promoting to making decisions.
Otherwise, it's just empty words.
Just for show.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to really understand what DEI is all about and what it takes to create a truly inclusive and equitable workplace.
This whole conversation about company culture makes me think about Elon Musk.
Wow.
You know, with Tesla and SpaceX.
He's known for being a really demanding boss.
Yeah, the sources talked about his ultra-hardcore work style.
Like, he expects people to work crazy hours.
And be totally dedicated.
And it's worked for him.
Yeah, he's achieved some amazing things.
But some people worry about burnout.
And high turnover.
And that it might not be inclusive for everyone.
Yeah. Some former employees have said they felt super pressured all the time.
They had to sacrifice their personal lives.
And some even reached a breaking point.
It makes you wonder if that kind of pressure is sustainable.
Especially for people with families.
Or other things going on in their lives.
And does it even make sense for every company?
Right?
Right.
Like, does Twitter need to be that intense?
It's a social media company.
It's not rocket science.
Right.
And actually, Musk has been shaking things up at Twitter, too.
Yeah. Lots of layoffs and people quitting.
And it feels chaotic over there.
It does. It's like he's trying to do the same thing at Twitter.
The same hardcore style.
But will it work?
Who knows? It's a big experiment.
And the results could change how we think about work in general.
Yeah. Like, what's acceptable and what's too much.
We were talking earlier about how consumers can really influence companies.
Right, with boycotts and stuff.
And it's interesting how that's happening on both sides of the DEI debate.
Totally. So you have people boycotting companies they think are too woke.
Right.
But you also have people supporting companies that are standing up for DEI.
Like Dolores Huerta calling for boycotts of Target and Walmart.
Because they cut back on their DEI programs.
Right. And then Reverend Al Sharpton is organizing buy-ins.
To support companies like Costco that are sticking with their DEI commitments.
It shows you how much power consumers have.
Yeah. Companies are definitely feeling the pressure.
From both sides.
It's a tough spot for them.
Makes you wonder, are companies more scared of upsetting conservative customers?
Than they are of supporting diversity.
That's a tough question.
It is. Some companies are choosing to stay neutral.
Like not taking a stand on anything.
Just trying to stay out of the whole mess.
But is that really the best approach?
Some people say silence is the same as agreeing.
Like if you don't speak up against something, you're supporting it?
Right. But others say businesses should just focus on business.
And stay out of politics.
It's a tough balance.
It is. And then there's the whole legal and financial risks.
Right. Companies are worried about getting sued or losing money.
So some executives don't want to say anything.
About social issues.
They're afraid of the consequences.
And it's not just a hypothetical fear.
Like Meta got threatened by Trump.
And they ended up paying him a ton of money.
To make it go away.
And some of that money went to his presidential library.
It's like they were forced to donate.
It's a way of silencing people.
So companies are stuck.
They're getting pressure from all sides.
Consumers, politicians, investors.
And they could face backlash no matter what they do.
So what are they supposed to do?
It's a tough question.
It is. It makes you wonder if this is just a temporary thing.
Like a pendulum swinging back and forth.
Or if it's a bigger shift.
In how companies see their role in society.
That's a good question.
And we'll have to see how it plays out.
One thing's for sure, this whole conversation about DEI isn't going away.
No, it's too important.
It makes me think about how the Trump administration talks about meritocracy.
How so?
Well, they're always saying DEI is unfair.
Right. They say it's not about merit.
But then they appoint people like Pete Heath.
Who ran those nonprofits into the ground.
Exactly. Or Tulsi Gabbard.
Who some people say is a national security risk.
It's like they don't really care about qualifications.
Only when it's convenient for them.
It seems like a double standard.
It does. They criticize DEI, but then they do the same thing.
And it's not just a few isolated cases.
Right, it's a pattern.
They've appointed people who believe in conspiracy theories.
Like RFK Jr. and his anti-vaccine views.
It's like they're trying to make these institutions look bad.
By putting unqualified people in charge.
And they say they're draining the swamp.
And fighting the elites.
But really, they're just replacing experts with people who agree with them.
And that's a problem.
It is. because it makes people lose trust in the government.
And in other important institutions.
Like the media.
And when people lose trust,
They start believing anything.
even conspiracy theories and misinformation.
One of the sources compared the rhetoric against DEI to fascism.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like talking about a perfect past and demonizing certain groups.
And putting one leader above everyone else.
And it's not just talk.
We're seeing it happen.
They're banning books and events.
And attacking education.
And making people distrust institutions. And let's not forget the scapegoating.
Right, like blaming DEI for a plane crash.
Even though there's no evidence.
It's classic authoritarian stuff.
Find someone to blame for everything.
So you don't have to take responsibility.
And it's working.
Especially online.
Social media makes it spread so fast.
People like Robbie Starbuck are using it to push these ideas.
And the algorithms make it worse.
They prioritize engagement.
And outrage gets people clicking. So these divisive stories just keep spreading.
And it's fueling all this resentment and distrust.
So are we doomed?
Doomed to what?
To just keep fighting and distrusting each other.
I don't think so.
But it feels like it sometimes.
I know, but there's still hope.
Really?
Yeah. The sources also talked about people resisting this stuff, individuals and organizations who are pushing back against these harmful narratives.
Like Reverend Sharpton and his buy-ins.
Exactly. And groups like Public Citizen are suing the Trump administration.
Stop them from overreaching their power.
People aren't just sitting back and accepting this.
They're fighting back.
And demanding accountability.
And it's not just about legal challenges or boycotts.
It's about talking to people.
Like friends and family.
Even colleagues.
Challenging their assumptions.
And trying to understand their perspective.
Even if you don't agree with them.
Exactly. And it's about learning.
About systemic oppression.
And how DEI can help.
This isn't just a political issue.
It's about the kind of society we want to live in.
What values we want to have.
And what kind of future we're building.
For ourselves and our kids.
One of the sources said something really powerful.
What was it?
They said, DEI isn't about giving people something they don't deserve.
Okay.
It's about giving them opportunities they might not have had otherwise.
Because of discrimination and injustice?
Exactly. It's about creating a fair system.
Not about handouts.
Right? Everyone has talent and potential.
And we all benefit when everyone has a chance to contribute.
That's what true meritocracy is all about.
Addressing the inequalities of the past.
So we can all have a fair chance in the present.
That's a great goal.
It is.
And if you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, subscribe, and share the Allison Knows podcast.
You can find us on Spotify and YouTube.
We'll be right back after a quick break to talk more about this. We've been talking a lot about DEI and the pushback against it and all the implications for our society.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is. And you know, one thing that really stuck with me is this whole idea of meritocracy.
It's a tough one because both sides say they're for fairness.
But they mean different things when they say that.
Exactly. Like their definitions of fairness don't match up.
So how are they different?
Well, the folks against DEI say it's not about merit anymore.
They say it's all about identity politics.
Yeah, they think people are getting jobs just because of their race or gender.
Not because they're actually the best person for the job.
Exactly. Like they're not qualified.
But people who support DEI say that's not what it's about at all.
Right. They say it's about leveling the playing field.
So that everyone has a fair shot.
Exactly. Regardless of their background.
But don't we already have that?
A lot of people think so.
Right.
But DEI supporters say, no way.
They say the system is biased.
Yeah. There are all these hidden barriers.
That make it harder for certain groups to succeed.
Exactly. Like people of color, women, LGBTQ folks.
So they're saying even if you're qualified,
you might not get the same opportunities.
Because of these systemic barriers.
Exactly.
So DEI is about breaking down those barriers.
And making sure everyone has an equal chance.
Based on their skills and their talent.
Right. Not on their race or gender or who they know.
One of the sources used a great analogy.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
It was like a race where some runners have to start way behind.
Oh, right. And some have to carry extra weight.
Exactly. And if you just look at who crosses the finish line first.
You miss the whole story.
Because the race wasn't fair to begin with.
And that's what DEI is trying to fix.
To make the race fair.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But is it actually working?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Are we actually making progress?
It's hard to say for sure.
I mean, white men still hold most of the leadership positions.
That's true. So there's still a long way to go.
It's not a quick fix.
Definitely not. It takes time to change deep-seated patterns.
And it's not just about numbers either.
Right. It's about how these changes are happening.
Are companies really committed to DEI?
Or are they just doing the bare minimum to look good?
Like checking off a box.
Exactly.
One of the sources said DEI has to be part of the company's DNA.
It's like woven into everything they do.
Right, not just a separate program.
It has to be part of their culture.
And their values.
Otherwise, it's just lip service.
And it won't really change anything.
Exactly.
This whole conversation about changing company culture makes me think about Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah. He's known for his intense work style.
Like at Tesla and SpaceX.
He expects a lot from his employees.
And he's achieved some incredible things.
But some people say it's not sustainable.
Like it leads to burnout and people quitting.
And it can be really exclusive.
Not everyone can work those kinds of hours.
Or handle that level of pressure.
And some former employees have said they felt pressured to sacrifice their personal lives.
Like their families and their health.
And it makes you wonder if that kind of culture is even necessary.
Right? Like, does every company need to be that intense?
Twitter, for example.
It's a social media company.
Does it really need that kind of hardcore environment?
It's an interesting question.
And Musk has been shaking things up at Twitter.
Big time. Lots of layoffs and resignations.
It seems chaotic.
It does. Like he's trying to impose his style on a completely different kind of company.
And it's not clear if it's going to work.
It's a risky experiment.
It is.
Yeah.
And the results could have a big impact on how we think about work in general.
What's expected of employees.
And what kind of work culture is sustainable.
Right.
You know, we were talking earlier about how consumers have a lot of power now.
Yeah, with boycotts and things.
And it's interesting how that's playing out on both sides of the DEI debate.
Totally. So you have people boycotting companies they think are too woke.
Right.
And then you have other people boycotting companies that aren't woke enough.
Exactly. Like Dolores Huerta calling for boycotts of Target and Walmart.
Because they scaled back their DEI programs.
And Reverend Sharpton organizing buy-ins to support companies that are sticking with DEI.
Like Costco.
It's like a tug-of-war.
With companies caught in the middle.
Trying to please everyone.
And it's not easy.
Makes you wonder, are companies more afraid of losing conservative customers
than they are of standing up for diversity and inclusion?
That's a tough one.
It is. And some companies are just trying to stay neutral.
Not taking sides.
Hoping to avoid the whole controversy.
But is that really the best approach?
Some people say silence is complicity.
Like if you're not speaking out against injustice.
You're part of the problem.
But others say businesses should just focus on business.
And stay out of politics.
It's a tricky balance.
It is. And then there's the legal risks.
And the financial risks.
Companies are worried about getting sued or losing money.
So some executives are afraid to speak out.
On anything controversial.
And we've seen examples of this.
Like Meta getting threatened by Trump.
And paying him a ton of money to make it go away.
It's a form of intimidation.
Silencing dissent.
I'm making sure everyone falls in line.
So companies are in a tough spot.
They're getting pressure from all sides.
And there's no easy answer.
It's a complex issue.
It is. And it makes you wonder if this is just a temporary thing.
Like a pendulum swinging back and forth.
Or for a more fundamental shift.
In how companies think about their role in society.
That's a good question.
And one that only time will answer.
But one thing's for sure, this conversation about DEI is important.
And it's not going away anytime soon.
You know, one thing's been really striking is how this whole DEI debate is connected to this bigger conversation about truth and facts.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like we're seeing this erosion of trust in experts and institutions.
And this rise of misinformation and conspiracy theories.
It's like people don't know what to believe anymore.
And that's dangerous.
Because when you don't have shared understanding of reality,
it's impossible to have a productive conversation.
Or to solve problems together.
Exactly. And it makes it easier for those in power to manipulate people.
To spread their own agenda.
And to divide us against each other.
One of the sources talked about how this is a classic tactic of authoritarian regimes.
To sow chaos and distrust.
And to undermine democratic institutions.
So it's something we need to be really vigilant about.
And we need to be critical thinkers.
To question what we see and hear.
And to seek out reliable sources of information.
Because facts matter.
They do. And so does truth.
And the future of our democracy may depend on our ability to discern the difference.
That's a powerful thought.
It is, and it's a call to action for all of us.
To be informed, engaged, and active citizens.
And to stand up for truth and justice.
Even when it's hard.
Because the stakes are high.
They are. And the choices we make today will have a lasting impact on the kind of world we create for tomorrow.
So let's choose wisely.
That's a great message to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into DEI and the backlash against it.
It's been a great conversation.
It has. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends.
You can find Allison Knows on Spotify and YouTube.
And be sure to follow Allison on Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Allison Knows podcast.